So we're at the refined sketch phase. So I've kind of had a rough sketch. I've gone in and I've made it a little bit more refined. Kind of did a little H polish, trim dynamic, and this is just really basic stuff. Clay brush, damp standard, just to kind of get my shapes in there. And again, I'm trying to keep it worst case scenario. I'm literally building everything from the ground up as opposed to resorting to a big library of predetermined finished shapes, which is definitely the way I would work, but not this time. So basically what I'm doing is I'm masking and then hitting Control W to make a polygroup. And while you're masking, if you hold down Control Alt and click on the unmasked parts, that'll actually sharpen your mask. It's under the masking options, but here's a little shortcut for you. So mask, Control W, that'll make it its own polygroup. And then isolate that polygroup by Control Shift clicking that polygroup. And then going into your split menu and doing a split hidden. Works for me. I have a marking menu for that, a custom one. And what I'm doing is just breaking these forms apart for a bunch of reasons. Number one is, as I break these things apart, I can refine them on their own, and it's a little bit easier to kind of work, with solo on or with my subtools hiding and showing. And another reason is, as I need to rebuild these forms, I'm actually rebuilding an actual object as opposed to something that just kind of sculpted detail. And it's also going to crash. It's also going to speed up the material ID assignment. So when I go color fill, I can just select an object and fill it as opposed to painting, poly paint detail. So what I'm doing is, as I isolate those subtools, I'll do a close holes, and that close holes will give me a polygroup for that close holes. So I can isolate that polygroup again on the close hole part, and then just kind of pull it and give it some thickness. Just really quickly giving these things some thickness. There's a ton of other tricks to do this. You can, if you wanted to, you could use Z Modeler and Q Mesh. You could use a difference mesh in your morph targets. A ton of different ways to do this, but I found that just closing holes, using your move tool or the transpose tool to give it some thickness. You can you can hit clay polish into your geometry menu to clean it up, or just smooth and H polish just to kind of get these shapes going. Or if you want to, and you got a library to pull from, replace these objects with something that's more final. Save you some time. And for example, we've got the chest plate here, and to get rid of those kind of wispy, thin edges, that's another reason to kind of pull that closed hole away from there. And another thing you might need to take into consideration is, when you close holes, it's not going to be a symmetrical operation. So I have a tendency to just close holes and then mirror and weld. Doesn't matter which axis. It'll go across the x-axis if you're Z forward, but just quickly doing a mirror and weld after that operation will get everything back on track as far as symmetry, which doesn't usually matter that much because it's usually on the back side of faces, but just something to keep in mind. And again, so now you can see here, because I've taken these pieces apart, I can immediately start refining them, and it's still sculpty. It is still easy for me to go in and make huge, massive changes if I want to. But super simple: move, clay, H polish, clay buildup. The usual suspects when it comes to just kind of getting forms in there and working out where things need to go. And this whole time, this isn't like production modeling where I know exactly what things need to do and where they need to be. I'm still exploring how things need to fit together, what might look cool. Should I put a strap here? Should I put a tube here? I'm not working from a picture. I've got reference up, but nothing, exactly what I need. So again, this is, I'm still consider this concept phase, but by the time I'm done concepting, it's basically a production model. Everything's figured out. It's really easy to go in and negotiate what needs to happen on the production side of things, and that's where the power of concepting in 3D comes in. And when you get those really thin meshes, another thing you want to keep in mind is, if you're working on a thin part of a mesh, go ahead and for your brushes, go to where it says on the left there, brush, auto masking, and then turn on that back face mask for all the relevant brushes, like your clay brush, clay buildup. Because as you brush on a thin mesh, it's going to want to pull through depending on your brush size. So just keep an eye on that. And it's not global. I don't know if anybody's made a Z-script for it yet where you can just toggle that on and off. You don't usually want it on for your move brushes or your snake hook or anything like that, but it's definitely useful for H polish and clay brush. And this isn't the whole thing. This is just a little piece of the chest that I'm kind of breaking things out and refining and dropping stuff in there. And I'll keep reiterating this. If you've got cool tubes that have a bunch of detail on them and you like that and you want to use that, then by all means do that. I'm still exploring just big shapes. I'm trying not to use a whole, like I said, the material or the asset library for insert mesh brushes. Trying to do it from scratch. But I'm not suggesting you should do that. I'm just saying that's what I did this time. And this is another part where, you can get a full body sketch, front, back, 3/4 of a really nice drawing of an object. But that real functionality and getting in there and getting noodly with clasps and how things anchor together and bolts and, how things turn and fold over each other. That's fun stuff to do, but it's a little bit time consuming. And if it's left up to the production artist to do all that, and you kind of have to, you're still doing a lot of concepting at that point because you kind of have to, what's a cool shape to kind of tell, this functionality. I still prefer concept artists who have an eye for design and stuff like that as opposed to me going in there and just kind of fiddling around until I kind of get something and then I throw it back over and the design guy's like, well, why didn't you do this? And I'm like, well, I didn't think of that. And again, a lot of that's practice. It's something you'll develop, but giving the tools to the people with that design sense and they can go in and figure this out, and it's kind of fun to do. You can sit here and watch this, and it's like, oh, it's kind of fun to go in there and kind of mush stuff around and carve in and clip and trim, and it doesn't have to be super done. I'm not asking you to go in and be the world's greatest box modeler. Absolutely not. If you can do that, by all means, be the world's greatest box modeler. I'm not trying to tell you not to do that either. But for those of us that aren't, or concept artists that aren't because, you haven't done a lot of 3D, this is perfectly acceptable, in my opinion, just to kind of get that exploration going in a more 3D kind of fun manner.